Here is a Soviet classroom product. Konstantin Samoilov, born and raised in the USSR. At 6, absorbed the correct ideology. At 11, chosen to read the correct speeches to other kids, to teach them how to behave around power. At 12, punished for questions he started asking and removed from the program. Yes, that boy is me. What if the boy shaped by that system is now warning you it's happening again? And if you think this can't happen, can't spread, schools are exactly how it spreads. Howdy, howdy. Friends, my name is Konstantin. Welcome to Inside Russia, where usual Russia is explained by the unusual Russian. I am Russian by birth, analyst by choice. I lived it, studied, and I report it. I make Russia make sense. You will not find here any BS, propaganda, or lies. Instead, you'll find truth, common sense, and logic. I've been watching the news in Russia, but I have not been reading the headlines. I've been reading the textbooks. Textbooks. Always have troubles with pronouncing this English word. Textbooks. Now, I start recognizing the language I heard quite some time before. Now, this was introduced to Russian schools back in 2022. And it is called The Conversations About the Important Things. Разговоры о важном. And it is a 40-year-old nightmare flashing back. I'm seeing it. Today, I'm going to show you the mechanics of how a generation's mind is being dismantled right now. Now, I'm not telling you this to be dramatic. I'm telling you this because something is happening that feels physically familiar, right here. It's like a smell that is, sticks. You smelled it a long time ago and it sticks to you. Yeah, it's definitely something like that. It's like a memory that you have, and it just doesn't go away. It lingers. I definitely heard that music before. I heard it back in the USSR, and it was not pretty. Tonight it's less facts and figures. Tonight is less doom scrolling the economy. Tonight is about culture and psychology and about memories and about the mechanism. I'm going to show you materials from Russian schools. Well, actually, this stuff I'm showing you. This textbook and whatever comes with it. And I'll compare it to what they're doing now to what I lived through as a Soviet kid. Children are not robots. They are smarter than any system. But school doesn't teach children information. School trains instincts. And if you train instincts long enough in a child, you really don't need police when that child grows up. People censor themselves once they grow up. You don't need police, you don't need censorship. Until recently, I thought it was strictly a problem of Soviet Union in the past, and now problem of Russia. But now I see that it applies to everyone, even to the societies who think of themselves as the best and the most democratic. And us start smelling the smell, smelling the smoke. Now, before I start heavy hitting, please tell me, what year did you finish school and in what country? In the USSR, perhaps? Russia, Ukraine, European Union, US, Canada, Australia? What was the unspoken rule that your school taught you? I'm pretty sure that there was one. And if you didn't have that, please let me know in the comments as well. So, let me start with a simple idea. When people talk about education, they argue about science, things like math, history, ideas, dates, numbers, things like that. But that's not what school is mainly for. It is for training a child to live inside a society, basically preparing a child for upcoming adult life. And every society has a hidden curriculum. The real lessons taught at school, they're not inside the textbooks. They are at, how do I say that? Around children. They are at school's air. In the Soviet Union, in the old country, we learned a few things right from the start. There was also a correct answer, even when the reality said otherwise. There was also a correct emotion, even when you didn't have that emotion. And there was also correct silence, especially when strangers, adult strangers, were watching somewhere. And there was a correct type of person who got rewarded: loyal, predictable, obedient, and careful. And that's why I call myself a Soviet classroom product. I'm not proud of it, but that's true. I'm being brutally honest with you. Back in 1984, I did not have a choice. 1984. Funny. It's 1984. It's the real year when I was starting out school. I also remember the second lesson. If you repeat the correct lines, you are safe. If you ask wrong questions, you become a problem. And I certainly learned that lesson. I became the problem for my school. Now, that is the core of Soviet mind. Not for the love of the state, but for the survival sake. It's survival habit. Don't stand out, don't be loud, don't be naive, don't say what you think. Learn the script, talk according to the script, that type of thing. And I would like to illustrate that with a personal story. I was a smart kid. From grade 1 to grade 11, I was a straight A student. And I was not a hooligan. I behaved well. My parents taught me how to behave. I was growing up in a very nice family. So I was at good terms at school. On good terms at school. By 11, and this is me about age, I would say 10, turning to 11, something like that. That's the period I'm talking about. Well, I have another picture for you. This one. But that's my senior high. That's when I was graduating school. And I was not naive there. Here I was pretty naive. I was indoctrinated. And I was at good terms at school. At 11, I was invited to become a part of the Soviet machine, Soviet propaganda machine. I was brought into the lowest rank that ever existed, but it was an official rank. The rank was called a school political informer. My goal was simple. My task was simple: to follow the news, to summarize them, and once a week, it was called the political information hour, to present the most significant news in front of my class, my friends, 20 or so people I considered my brothers and sisters, because we spent 10 years together, in one room, basically. Amazingly enough, 40 years later, this is sort of what I do now here at Inside Russia. But back then, they did not ask me to analyze and present my own opinions and ideas. They asked me to strictly translate um, what I heard from official newspaper called Pionierskaya Pravda, the Truth of the Pioneers. That's the best I can translate it. And without my intake, just inform people of what was going on. So my task was to identify most important things and talk about them for about 20 minutes or so. Now I do similar work, only I add my analysis based on my experiences and knowledge, and I do that on a global scale. My audience back then was 20 children, school children, and now it is 115 million people all over the world, and that's 1.5% of world's population, by the way. Not too shabby. Now, back then, so it was political informing of political events in the world and in the USSR. I did that for about a year, and then my promising propagandist career came to a crashing instant end. An American man was the reason for that. Dr. Charles Hyder. I don't know if you've heard the name, but I certainly know it by heart. Charles Hyder and Angela Davis were the most famous Americans, most popular Americans in the USSR. Now, in 1986, American astrophysicist and anti-nuclear activist Dr. Charles Hyder launched a hunger strike right outside the White House. Starting September 23rd, 1986, he demanded Ronald Reagan stop the arms race and move towards eliminating nuclear weapons. Yeah, like he wasn't doing that. In the US, Charles Hyder stayed relatively obscure, but in Soviet Union, media turned him into a huge symbol. And even Mikhail Gorbachev himself, contacted him and urged to end his hunger strike. After 218 days, frustrated that nothing changed, he ended it by starting eating again. And I was doing the political informing of the other kids in the class, and I talked of Dr. Hyder every single week, covering the progress of his hunger strike. It was something of a holy act. A person in American was sacrificing his life. Basically, he was going on, hunger strike to, pressing for peace and disarmament. That was incredible. Everyone just hailed him. Everyone followed him in the big media and among kids. Okay, so it was our, Soviet Union's hero. Towards the end of his hunger strike, I was doing a political information class, and a school principal was present at the time. It was a sort of an open lesson. It was very formal for our teacher and for the principal, and there were a couple more officials from our school there. To us, to the children, that was very official. Everyone was dressed up. Everyone was sitting up, not talking like we usually do. We did with neighbors and so to speak. So, and I did the speech. I was prepared, and I talked about Dr. Hyder doing about 180 days of hunger strike. And this pictures like that were all over the media. The newspapers, the TV showed them, he was the political news number one. Now, I started smelling something fishy. Look at this photo. That's about 180 days or so, 3/4 of his strike. And I, did my part, and I asked a simple question. Why was Dr. Hyder still alive after 180 days of hunger, let alone fat? Now, that's a very simple question. That's just connecting the dots. That's 180 days of hunger. And everyone was selling us this idea that he was starving. He didn't eat anything. He was a complete 100% like absolute fasting, right? 180 days. Now, at school, I was taught a different thing. We were all taught that a person could not go without food for more than 21 days and without water for 3 days, which was a lie, but that's what I taught us. So 21 days and a person dies, and all of a sudden this Dr. Hyder does 180 days. And in front of the principal, in front of the teacher, in front of everyone, I asked this question. It is very odd that he is alive, because by all rules of human biology, he should be dead by now. And then he hasn't lost weight. And it had the effect of explosion, like a bomb exploded in the classroom, because the kids, they usually didn't care about the political information. It was more of a formality for all of us. But then all of a sudden, they heard something different, and then they started looking at me like, oh, really? Why is he still alive? Why is he still fat? And the principal, I remember her looking at me with anger and fury, and she was keeping silent, and there was an elephant in the room that we kind of all froze. And at that moment, I realized the power of truth. Okay, that was a very important moment in my life. The next day or day after, or same evening, I think it was the next day, that I got the news. Our teacher walked in and said, Samoilov, you're not doing political informing anymore. We have to pick somebody else. And by that time, I realized that I was being kicked out of the program because I started asking questions, because I didn't go along the rules. That was a lesson for me. And if the USSR stayed, further than 1991, I would probably be using those lessons in my life. But thank goodness it fell apart. And I realized quite a few things, but it was a pretty funny moment. So Dr. Charles Hyder, that's the guy who destroyed my early career of propagandist. Thank goodness. Now, when I look at what is being, formalized in Russian schools today, I see kind of the same thing emerging. Not at the scale of the USSR was. The USSR was a system, but Russia, it is also forming as the system. It's a young system, but the signs are there. At Russian schools, I just don't see politics. Instead, I see training of those instincts like we had in the USSR all over again. Now, to keep this live stream and message grounded, I'll give you a framework. I'll talk about 3 layers. This is how school shapes a worldview anywhere in the world. Layer number 1, curriculum. What is written in the textbooks. Layer number 2, rituals. What students must perform together. And layer number 3, incentives. What gets rewarded and when what gets punished. So let's go layer by layer. Layer number 1, curriculum. This is what Russian curriculum looks like right now for certain things. When a state wants to rebuild certain mindset, it doesn't always need to lie openly. It can do something more sophisticated. It can shift emphasis, can remove context, it can change the moral framing. Who is noble, who is right, who is dangerous, who is terroristic, who is foreign, who is the enemy, who is one of them, who is one of us. That I learned that in the USSR very well. By this age, I already knew who was them and who was us. Okay, Russian schools. Now the USSR fell apart, and I was lucky enough to be at school before it fell apart and 2 years after. So I also got the free system, free from context, free from this brainwashing. So in Russian schools, they were free of that stuff. But then 2022, everything changed. And I'm talking about the current day, in the last 4 years. Now, this is what they're doing. It is sophisticated. They're not saying openly, but they're just shifting attention. They're putting emphasis on things. And they do it with a very calm, very teacher-like voice. The most powerful propaganda is not screaming, it's whispering. It's normal. It's boring. I'm not even saying every page is a lie of this thing, okay? I'm saying the architecture changes. In the USSR, history was not taught to understand complexity and the truth of what happened in the past. It was taught to assign loyalty to the right structure, to the state. So when I'm showing you these materials, I want you to watch for three signs. The child is taught that the power is sacred, not accountable, and it is right there in these books. Just a few of them are shown right here, but this bunch. Power is sacred, not accountable. Number two, the child is taught that violence is normal if it serves the right purpose. If it's ours, they can use violence, okay? If it's them, they can't. And number three, the child is taught that doubt is dangerous because doubt sounds like betrayal, and you can't betray us, okay? This is not what they do. So I have a question. When you were at school, and you already told us where and when, were you taught to question or taught to repeat? I'd really like to know that in the comments. Now, layer number two, rituals. Let's go a little deeper, because curriculum is not enough. A child can read paragraph, something in the book, lines in the book, and forget it. But a child who performs a ritual with the whole class remembers it in the body. I think the scientists call it the muscle memory. Rituals train belonging. Now, I'm going to show you this picture again. Please take a look. What is around my neck? It's a red pioneer tie. This was given to me as I was accepted to the pioneer organization of Soviet Union. I actually had to give a pledge. And after I was accepted, I was given the right and the privilege to have this red tie around my neck that made me pioneer. Now, when the USSR fell apart, pioneers were gone. Young Komsomol, another organization that was between pioneers and communists, was also gone. So everything was gone. We were free. We were propaganda free. It was intoxicating time, even for a teenager. Now, I want you to look at another picture. And this is a very recent development. What is this teacher doing? She's tying a knot of a necktie. The colors are different. Mine was bright red, the color of blood, as they said, because everyone in the past shed blood for the USSR, and we were prepared and conditioned to sacrifice our blood for the USSR if the motherland would want us to do that. And they're doing the same thing, only the colors are a bit different. Okay, this is a very, very recent development. This is the new state, new Russia, new propaganda. Well, new old propaganda. Belonging pressure is stronger than logic. When we were giving pledge as the kids to get this around our neck of the color of the blood, we didn't think of what we were pledging. No, we had to give a pledge at this young age to become pioneer, then to become Komsomol and become a communist, member of a communist party. 3 stages. We never questioned. We never applied logic. We just followed. Because there was a ritual that brought us as belongers to a large organization. In Soviet school, we had other rituals. We had ceremonies, we had slogans, we marched together, we sang together, we did collective recitations, moral lessons, and it all created a physical feeling. Everyone is doing it, so it must be normal, right? And the modern version of this normal is not identical, but the principle is very same. Again, I would like to bring you to this picture. It tells you a story better than 1,000 words. The principles are the same. Regular values lesson, patriotic calendar of events. Look at that. You see that calendar right there. Scripted classroom discussions, correct public statements that are rewarded. And, of course, the wrong statements get punished. And they're very serious about punishment. If a child, teenager, speaks up against the war, against what is in these books, the secret police pays a visit to parents, and sometimes the parental rights can be stripped away from parents, and they can land in prisons. That happened before, okay? Just for the statements or for the drawings that their children made at public schools. Even if a kid privately laughs at it, it still gets in trouble. They still learn the key rule. No matter you take it seriously or laugh, you still learn that public life has one language and private life has another. And that is pure USSR in large capital letters. The split is the theory, the factory of the Soviet mind. And the mind gets trained to live in 2 realities. And that is the tragedy. Once you master the double reality skill, and I talked about it in the previous live stream, by the way, the lessons I learned from the USSR, I suggest you check it out. I'm going to put a link. So once you master this double reality skill, you can survive anything. But you lose something very human. You lose your sincerity. And layer number 3, the most important layer, incentives. People always ask, do teachers believe this? Now, sometimes yes and sometimes no. I still recall the facial expression of the principal when she heard me asking about Dr. Charles Hyder, how he was still alive after 180 days of going without food and why he was still fat. Now, I still remember her expression. It was like time froze for me. This is framed, like a picture framed in my memory, but I still don't understand whether she believed that he was really going without food for 180 days. And I just broke her reality by that question. Or she knew. And it was, I read people quite well, but it was not I couldn't understand it at the time, and I still don't know. I tend to believe she believed that he was on a hunger strike, and when I asked the question, She put dots together in her brain, and I think she hated me for that. Okay, her world just broke apart. That's why I was kicked out of the program, and had the USSR been still alive, I would have no place, because I was given a chance to become a propagandist, and I blew it, you know. So teachers sometimes believe it, sometimes don't, but belief here isn't the main driver of this stuff, of what they say, you know, the new paradigm, the new philosophy. The main driver is, what does this system reward? What does it punish? So my teacher, my school teacher, who was taking our class, and we had like a main teacher, tutor type of person in the USSR. She did all these rituals because she was forced to, and she was paid for that. But she never put her soul, and she never believed. For one simple reason: her father, back in 30s, was farmer. He was growing wheat, and she told us a story once, and it was a very sad one. He was transporting wheat from farm to a collective place where they collected wheat, and they used a carriage and a horse, and there was a bunch of wheat, and they didn't have much to carry it in, so they just covered it up with a cloth on top. And when they were traveling for about 25 miles, 40 kilometers, they lost about 10 kilos or 18 pounds of wheat. No, 20 pounds of wheat. Lost in transportation. He was arrested and sentenced to 10 years in prison. And my school teacher was growing up without father because of that. She didn't like communists. She didn't like the state. But she was forced to play the game. And you know what? She got rewarded for that. First of all, with the job of a teacher, because she could not teach us without that, and with some extra money. In the Soviet Union, teachers were often not monsters. Our teacher was absolutely fantastic. There were many decent people. They were trapped inside the Soviet system. The system didn't need everyone to love it. It only needed people to comply. That was it. Compliance spreads through incentives. A teacher wants to keep the job. Principal wants to avoid trouble. Parents want their kids to be safe and not singled out. Kids want belonging. I remember that day I was accepted to the Pioneer organization, and I was given the right, and as they told me, privilege, to put the red tie around my neck. And it was March, it was cold, and I took off my coat because I wanted everyone to see that I'm a pioneer now. It was one of the proudest moments in my life, you know, emotionally. I still remember that. My mom still remembers that. So kids want belonging, and system gives them that belonging. That's how the whole society learns to play the game at early age. And when you look at modern schooling trends, not just Russian, but in other countries too, don't only ask what they teach, ask what becomes dangerous to say. That is the key signal, the key moment to look. And it's not just about Russia any longer. It's about many other countries who think they're very democratic. Because what becomes dangerous to say disappears from the future. Now, let's make this human. Because this is not just a policy discussion. This is about families. There are a few dilemmas. Number one, the teacher. The teacher is the front line. The teachers are often tired, underpaid, stressed, and they're just not the right people for the job. Teacher might think, I don't want politics in my classroom. I just want to teach literature. But the system says, Teach this. Follow this format. Do not improvise. So the teacher learns the Soviet compromise. I will do the ritual and I will try to keep my soul somewhere else. And that's exactly what our teacher, math teacher, did. She did the rituals. She taught us rituals. But you know what? That was very formal stuff. She didn't put her soul. Her soul was somewhere else. She was trying to teach us how to be decent people, which, I'm so very grateful to her. And this is how decent people adopt. Not because they love it, but because they are cornered. They have no choice. Dilemma number 2, the parent. Parents become strategists. They don't ask this question, how do I raise a free child? Instead, they ask, how do I protect my child from unnecessary attention? And that's Soviet parenting. Well, unfortunately, it's become Russian parenting as well. It produces the sentence we all know. Just don't argue. Don't stand out. Okay? Just be like everyone else. And that sentence, more than any textbook, rebuilds the Soviet mind. Dilemma number 3, the child. The child becomes a diplomat. Child learns, I will say what they want me to say. I will think what I think. I will survive. And at first, it kind of looks like intelligence, right? But over time, it can become something incredibly dark. A child grows up believing truth is optional. Words are tools. Morality is flexible. Public life is theater. The politics are fake and theater. This is not just politics. That is cultural corrosion. And right now, we are in so much more dangerous situation because back then, we did not have social media. The USSR was a closed society. Now, the USSR mindset has spread to Russia. And it's spread into other countries. And it's fueled by freaking social media. Now, did your school teach you honesty? Or did it teach you caution? Please let me know. Very interesting for me to get feedback from you. Thank you, friends. I'm getting close to the end. Why this matters beyond Russia? Okay, I think this is the most important part of this live stream. Some people will say, Konstantin, why should I care? This is Russia, this is Soviet Union. Why do we care about Soviet Union anyway? Well, because Soviet Union is the blueprint for freaking Russia today, right? And Russia is the blueprint for many other countries who consider themselves perfect democracies. We're seeing how their politicians are acting. They're taking Putin's blueprint and simply repeating it. So, you know what? The schools will come next. I guarantee you. This is why it's so important for you to understand. Soviet mind is not a nationality. It's a model of human behavior under pressure. It can be rebuilt anywhere in the world when institutions weaken. Fear rises. People trade truth for stability and security. And this is why I always tell my audience, do not study Russia just to laugh at Russia. Don't laugh at us. Study us to understand what happens when a society accepts the lie as a normal. And also, Russian schooling impacts not only Russia, it shapes the worldview of an entire future generation in a nuclear power with a huge global footprint. Russian kids are being taught, brainwashed, indoctrinated by this crap right now, okay? They're just kids, but they're gonna be adults in 15, 20 years. And in 25 years, they will gain power. So yes, it does concern you. Now, it's not too late. It's not time to panic. but it concerns you in a very sober, slow way. Thank goodness there's plenty of time to wake up and change things. And how? Let's talk about it some other